My name is Luke Wanek, and I'm an agroforestry specialist with the Agroforestry and Woodlot Extension Society. We're a nonprofit that provides education on the various benefits, the environmental, social, and economic benefits of trees in agricultural landscapes, on private lands in Alberta. And we also help landowners design and implement tree planting projects, from riparian buffers, wetland buffers, to shelter belts, food forests, and woodland enhancements, a whole diversity of different tree planting projects we assist with. And here today to kind of walk you through our tree planting process, the steps that we follow from designing a planting all the way through to implementing it and having the trees survive and thrive. And we're using the farm here that we're on today as a case study, because this farm is looking to establish a number of wetland buffers, and this is being spearheaded by Brenda Bomer, who has owned this farm since '94 and managed it since '97.
I'm a grain farmer, and grain farmers are often frustrated by sloughs, what we call wetlands. And the struggle is, how close to the water can we go with our farming operations, and can we plant, will it dry up enough that we can get another acre seeded? And it gets to be frustrating after a while, and I have a lot of natural areas around here, and it just seemed like the right thing to do. This is a prime piece of property here where I could provide more space for nature and just separate the cropland from, and make this wetland better by planting trees, having the biodiversity, getting more water, improving the water cycle. And yeah, so it was kind of a natural evolution and went from there.
And you were saying before that you used to crop through this area that is now a wetland here.
Right, and it's prime farmland, and on a dry year it's moist and I can pull off a tremendous yield. But on a dry, that doesn't happen that often. It's more work to keep it cultivated and trying to let it be natural, give space for wildlife. So it's kind of, that's the dilemma the grain farmers face. We're taught to try and get value out of every acre, but it's, we need to leave space for nature.
In any planting project that we do, we kind of, in our minds, divide it into 6 different steps. So you start with the site assessment, then design development, sourcing your stock, your planting stock, site preparation, and then planting and maintenance. So in this first video, I'm just going to focus on the first of those steps, site assessment, and the later steps will be covered in later videos. In a site assessment, by site assessment we mean both an assessment of the site conditions and characteristics and an assessment of the landowner's goals. So what do they want to get out of the project? So we just heard from Brenda. Brenda is interested in a lot of different things with this project. She's interested in providing habitat for wildlife, giving back to nature, and healing her water cycle, and those sorts of things. And wetlands, wetland buffers are a perfect way to do that. I mean, wetlands are magnets for various forms of biodiversity, and they can help to mitigate flood and drought cycles quite well. But you could have other goals as well. Different land owners and managers do have different goals. So you could be interested in providing habitat for pollinators or pest suppressing insects, or birds in particular. You could be interested in providing shelter for your crops or your livestock. You might also be interested in getting fruits or biomass out of your wetlands. And the design of these wetland buffers can be tailored to provide those different functions. So it's good to be up front of them right at the beginning. So now we get a sense of the landowner's goals. The other part of the site assessment is to understand the site conditions, like the soils, the vegetation, what animals are present, the microclimate, so the winds and the water moisture regime, and also various human impacts. So there's a lot of things to consider at once when you're doing a site assessment, which is why we've kind of made this ticky box style worksheet that I take with me, like basically anytime I do a a site assessment, and it has all the details on the landowner's goals. It has a space for you to fill those out and kind of go through the process of basically indicating what kind of texture of soils you have and how compact are they and what kind of water moisture do you have. And it's really helpful. I've done a lot of these assessments, but I still find it really helpful to have one of these with me just so I can keep it all in one place. And basically when I do a site assessment, the only thing I bring with me is this worksheet, a clipboard, a map of the site, a planting shovel so I can dig into the soil and see what kind of conditions are there, and then a camera. Even just a simple cell phone camera is enough just to take pictures of the site and remind me what the conditions were like. And it's also useful to see them at different times. So anyways, there's a lot of things to consider, and they're covered in this worksheet, which is available from our website. So for now, I'm just going to kind of focus on 3 things to really watch out for when you're planting a wetland buffer into cropland. One key thing is to have a sense of where the high water line is. So you can sometimes tell the high water line as a mark in the vegetation, or from talking to the landowner. If you are the landowner or manager and you've been on the land for a while, you know kind of on average in the springtime how high does the water get around your wetland. Yeah, in this case we've actually marked that out here with a stake here, and there's a flag there as well. And that's useful to know because typically when we're planting these buffers, we start from just above the high water line and work our way up from there when we're planting trees and shrubs. And the reason for that is because we just don't want our little trees and shrubs to get flooded out when they're small like that. The ones that can stand a bit of flooding can always move into the wetland after the fact. They can always kind of spread in. And this is particularly the case when we're doing site preparation, like tilling up the ground or something like that, because it can be mucky to work in areas that are below, and in certain cases you also need to get approval, such as in Alberta, you would need to get Water Act approval if you're working below the high water line there. So a lot of things to consider, but typically we start planting above the high water line. The second thing to watch out for when planting into cropland is competition from weeds, and particularly above ground competition. If you're planting into like hayland or pasture, you got to watch out for a thick sod mat, so the roots of grasses that can really take up a lot of nutrients and water and can compete with the seedlings for those. And but here obviously we don't have any of that to worry about below ground, but we do have as the weeds grow, they will compete for light and then eventually compete for nutrients as well for the seedlings. And so some measures need to be done to make sure that those weeds don't do that. And we'll be talking about those measures in later videos, how we kind of protect seedlings from that. And then the final sort of thing to watch out for when planting in cropland, just to alert you to, would be to watch out for herbicide drift. So if there is spraying being done in adjacent fields, it's important to make sure that the landowner or the manager or the farmer is using practices that minimize drift, so not spraying on windy days and things like that. And then also I still like to leave about a 5-meter buffer in between the edge of the trees and where the cropland starts. And I mean, that buffer does not guarantee that drift won't hit the seedlings. It can definitely travel much further than that, but it's just every little bit helps with that. So that's just a rule of thumb for me. Going through the site assessment process and filling out this worksheet and things like that can also provide really important insight into another question, which is something to be considered. Is planting actually necessary here? So certain wetlands, naturally you wouldn't really find trees and shrubs there. Saline potholes or small temporary wetlands in the grasslands in southern Alberta. Sometimes trees and shrubs wouldn't even naturally grow there. And the flip side of that is sometimes if you just take the pressure off and stop cropping through or grazing through your wetlands, they have a remarkable resilience and can bounce back and grow things back by themselves. And sometimes in those cases, a cheap and easy option is to just kind of wait and see and let that happen. So if you check out over here in this part of the wetland, we can actually see that some willow and some looks like some aspen here is this is natural regrowth that's happening right here, which is a really good sign. And sometimes if you sort of give your wetland some rest, this can happen. Brenda has mentioned that this has happened after many years of rest, and so whether this has taken a long time to grow in, and it's not in all parts of the wetland. In wetlands that have been fully disturbed or are not near healthy areas or have a long history of disturbance, those are the wetlands where planting would be really helpful for kickstarting the process of getting a natural buffer back around them. And in this case, we do have a bit of natural regrowth happening here, which is great to see. But if Brenda was going to kind of wait for that natural regrowth around the entire wetland, it would take a long time, and it might be quite weedy until it happened. In this case, we're trying to get those trees and shrubs established a lot quicker. That provides a brief overview of our site assessment process here. If after all that you decided that planting is in fact the appropriate thing for your site and your goals, then the next step would be to moving towards designing your project and sourcing stock for your design. And so those next steps will be covered in the next video.